going home to work and to take courses during the summer, and it's less expensive that way. So if that's the case, then tell us. This is another lesson for applications. Don't be reluctant to tell us what's going on. Admissions committees, by and large, abhor a mystery. If you leave us an unanswered question, we are likely to fill in an answer in a much less flattering way than you will. So don't leave unanswered questions, don't leave blank spaces, don't leave us mysteries, because we don't cope well with mysteries. And if, in fact, you are doing something like dodging the tougher courses at UMass, you have to imagine that somebody's going to notice that. And that is probably not going to play well, really for two reasons. One, because you dodged the tough courses, and another, because it probably says something about you as a person. And we're going to be serious about that. Any other features of the academic record? What about your major? Anybody want to make a comment about your major? What majors are good?
All of them.
All of them. God, I love my work here is done. How do I shut this off? I'm going to use an important phrase here. Listen clearly. I don't care. I'm going to use that phrase a lot. I don't care what you major in. I care that you care. I care that there's something that is intellectually stimulating and challenging to you that you do in depth and with rigor, that you're challenged by it, that you get thrown for a loop by it, that you pick yourself up and carry on and learn from that experience. I don't care what you major in. It is of no consequence to me. I only want to know why it is of consequence to you. Other questions about the academic record?
How vigorous?
How rigorous is your coursework? Yes, this is a critically important matter. If we really are looking for people to delve into something in depth, taking upper level courses, courses where you are required to think analytically and to defend your position. Very important, whatever the discipline may be, there are courses at the second and third and fourth levels that require students to do those things. We're interested in how you handled that, how you responded to that, and how you grew with it, and how you can tell us about it. Let's move on to the MCAT. The MCAT, how many people here have taken the MCAT? At least one over here. Anybody else have taken the MCAT? The MCAT is a very challenging test. The MCAT has been evaluated by people who know of such matters and been compared to other graduate level and professional school admissions tests. And the MCAT is the best of the tests in that it evaluates more than just memory. It requires analytical and synthetic thinking. It requires higher order processing. They will give you information that you have mastered and ask you to do something with it you have never done before to develop an answer to a new challenge drawn out of the basic information. This is a very challenging test. People do not do well on the MCAT if they are not fully prepared for the MCAT. And I get a lot of people asking me, so when's the right time to take the MCAT? My answer is the first moment at which you are fully prepared. And I have no idea when that will be. The MCAT is now offered 27 times on 24 separate days during the academic year. There's probably one that will be convenient for you, and that will be good. Taking the MCAT to see how it goes, I'll give you a hint. It's going to go badly if you are not prepared. If you have not taken all the prerequisites, if you have not studied assiduously for the MCAT, it will go badly. It always does. This is not a test that you take cold. This is not a walk in the park. On the other hand, people who have taken the prereqs, who study carefully and systematically, who challenge themselves, use the practice exams that MCAT publishes or other documents, take a review course if that's how you do best, study on your own, do it on the web, whatever you do. For people who have prepared well, they do well on the MCAT. There's a very, very tight correlation. I was part of a group that studied this. There's a very tight correlation between preparation for the MCAT and the score on the MCAT. You can predict where your baseline will be from your SAT scores. If you did well on the SAT, you were positioned to do well on the MCAT, assuming you studied. If you had trouble with the SAT, then you're going to want to increase your study time for the MCAT to make sure that you do your best performance. It's okay to take the MCAT more than once, but understand the data on the statistical likelihood of improvement on the MCAT before you sign up to take it again. Questions about the MCAT?
Do you guys consider how many times you take it?
The question was, do we consider how many times you've taken it? Schools will typically follow what is the psychometrician's advice, which is you average all the MCAT scores. So if you've taken it 3 times, most schools will average your 3 scores. Some will take the best score, some will take the most recent score, but because in general the data looks like the MCAT is the most valid predictor of performance in medical school, when you average multiple attempts for a single applicant, most schools will do that. So taking it just to see how it goes is going to lower you the average that schools look at. So that's probably not a good idea. Okay? Other questions or comments about the MCAT? Yes?
If a school took the average of your MCAT scores, do they value the trends as much as they do for the academic record?
In general, yes. The question was, do we value the trend for the MCAT? The answer is yes. Unfortunately, there are some schools that still use a hard cutoff point for GPA and MCAT. For 6 years, I chaired the National Committee on Admissions for the Association of American Medical Colleges, and I made a comment on the day I took that office that my first goal was to abolish thresholds for GPAs and MCATs. You are looking at a failure. I didn't do it. I maybe got 1 or 2 schools to drop it. Schools may still use thresholds, and if they use a threshold, they'll use the average. They won't look at the trend. Some schools will use a threshold for GPA. If they're dumb enough to use a threshold, they'll be dumb enough to use the science GPA rather than the overall GPA, and those cutoff points will typically be somewhere between 3.0 at the lowest to 3.5 at the highest. More thoughtful admissions programs will look at all the other things we talked about in the academic record, including where you go to school, and they'll be respectful of the rigor of the courses at UMass Amherst and will give you appropriate credit for that when evaluating your file. Other questions or comments about the MCAT? What other kinds of information are we likely to have?
Leadership roles?
Leadership roles. Tell me about leadership roles.
What kind of positions you held that have required like organization, leading a team or a group through a process?
Yeah. Why do you think we care about leadership roles?
You're going to be like working with a team as a position.
Yeah, in order to take on a leadership role, that indicates, among other things, that you are typically respected by the colleagues who are engaged in whatever activity you are leading. It means you've been thoughtful and systematic, and you've hung around for a little while. So we like all of those things. We like endurance. We like people who stick with something and carry it forward to completion. We like people who are respected enough by their colleagues that they will typically be elected to leadership roles or be appointed to leadership roles and be successful at them. Leadership is important because it reflects something about you behaviorally and characterologically. What else? What other kind of information might we be looking at? Experiences or activities, they're called on the MCAS application. Tell me more.
Like research and shadowing, volunteer work.
Okay, so research, shadowing, volunteer work. Which of those is important?
Volunteer.
I don't care. I told you that come around again. I don't care what your activities are. I care that you care. I don't care what you do. I care that you do something with depth, with rigor, be challenged by it, really sink your teeth into it, grow with it, and then help us how that experience has allowed you to understand something about yourself and the world. Good applicants tell us about their activities and the work they encounter. Great applicants tell us about their activities and how they learn something about themselves and the world through the course of that work. Now, it is true that if your activities do not include any clinical experience, if you've never been in a patient care environment, never been in the caring role yourself, admissions committees will be reluctant to go along with your hypothesis that medicine is the career for you, because we will wonder how you have tested that if we don't see any evidence of it. So as a caveat to the I don't care, if you have not engaged in a caring role in any circumstance, we're going to be worried about that. Did you have a comment or a question?
Someone actually told me shadowing a doctor was illegal because it violates HIPAA. I was just wondering if that was true.
The question is it illegal to shadow a doctor? Should I go home and arrest all of the people who have shadowed me in clinic? No, it is not illegal. It is illegal if you are introduced to the patient in a false circumstance. If you are identified as an observer and the patient has an opportunity to say, doc, no, thank you, that's perfectly fine. That's probably an excuse given by someone who didn't want to have anybody shadowing him or her. Other comments about activities. We mentioned research. We mentioned community service. We mentioned clinical work. What else? Why do we care about research? What if you don't want to be a scientist? All right, so one reason we might care about research is that it shows that you're committed to something.
It might develop your analytical skills.
Excellent. So the laboratory environment, whether it's actually bench science or the more clinically oriented or population-based stuff like I do, it tests and stresses your analytical thinking in very significant ways. And that's helpful to us. And when we read your activities, we're going to try to understand whether you were engaged in that research at a purely technical level or whether you were engaged at a conceptual level. Did you participate in research design? Did you participate in manuscript preparation and data analysis? Did you present the work as a poster or an abstract at a meeting? Those are things that we will be wondering about when we look at your application because it will help us understand the ways in which you were engaged. Is there any other reason why we might like research? There is one more.
I think the collaboration.
Collaboration. Excellent. Research is a fundamentally collaborative activity, as is medicine. The practice of medicine in the modern era is a team sport. It is not an individual competition. People in medicine who do not play well in groups have a lot of trouble. Laboratories and other research environments are intensely collaborative. It's a very, very good environment to understand someone's ability to engage in that kind of work.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Are you just looking at science research, or would like something in the social behavioral sciences be relevant?
The question was, are we looking only at science and